The morning sun peeked through the heavy drapes, casting streaks of golden light across the bedroom floor. I rolled over, my arm instinctively reaching for Lily, but her side of the bed was empty and cold. Again, with a sigh, I pushed myself up and headed for the walk-in closet, my bare feet sinking into the plush cream carpet. As I dressed for the day in an impeccably tailored suit, I couldn't help but steal a glance at the framed photo on my dresser. A snapshot of Lily and me on our wedding day. Her radiant smile, those sparkling eyes. Where had that light gone? Downstairs, I found Lily lounging by the pool, a half-empty glass of white wine in her hand. She barely acknowledged my presence as I stepped onto the patio. "Good morning," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "I'm heading into the office." She gave a slight nod, her gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the crystal-clear waters. It was as if she were already a million miles away. The drive into downtown Los Angeles was a familiar ritual, the roads a well-worn path I could navigate with my eyes closed. As I settled into the leather seat of my Bentley, my mind drifted back to the early days of our marriage, when Lily's infectious laughter had filled these very streets. Back then, her dreams of becoming an artist had seemed so vibrant, so attainable. I'd spent countless evenings listening to her chatter excitedly about her latest projects, the canvases she'd bring to life with broad, colorful strokes. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, that passion had faded, replaced by, what? Boredom? Resentment? I shook my head, forcing my focus back to the present as I pulled into the parking garage of my office building. Lily's discontentment was a puzzle I couldn't solve, no matter how successful I became. My real estate empire was an ever-expanding force, devouring properties across the city and beyond. I took pride in my work, in the meticulous attention to detail that had built this mighty machine. Yet for all my accomplishments, for all the wealth and status I'd accumulated, I couldn't seem to recapture the spark that had drawn Lily to me in the first place. The day passed in a blur of meetings, negotiations, and deals struck with a firm handshake. I was in my element here, commanding respect with my sharp intellect and unwavering confidence. But as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, my thoughts turned homeward once more. What would I find upon my return? The same hollow silence, the same empty disappointment in Lily's eyes? I couldn't fathom how someone could have everything and still be so utterly unfulfilled. As I pulled into the driveway of our sprawling estate, the harsh reality hit me once again. Lily was exactly where I'd left her that morning, lounging beside the pool with a fresh glass of wine. Her eyes flickered up to meet mine, but there was no warmth in that gaze, no recognition of the man I'd once been to her. In that moment, I knew something had to change. The life I'd so carefully constructed, the empire I'd built from nothing, it was all a hollow achievement if I couldn't find a way to rekindle the fire that had first drawn Lily to me. I was determined to solve this puzzle, no matter how complex, no matter what it took. Little did I know, the solution would come from the most unlikely of sources, and it would nearly destroy everything I held dear. It was during one of these solitary commutes that fate seemed to intervene. Stopped at a red light in the heart of downtown LA, I found myself beside a familiar face, Tom, my personal trainer from a few years back. Our eyes met briefly, and he flashed that trademark grin, all bravado and charm. "Josh, fancy running into you here," he called out as the light turned green. "We should grab a drink sometime, catch up?" I offered a non-committal nod before pulling away, but his words lingered. Catch up? The mere thought was almost laughable given how our paths had diverged. While I'd ascended to even greater heights of success, Tom was still peddling the same personal training hustle, constantly in search of his next paycheck. Yet, there was an undeniable charisma about the man, a magnetism that had always made our sessions enjoyable, if slightly inappropriate at times. A few suggestive comments, lingering glances, nothing too overt, but just enough to create a subtle frisson of tension. Perhaps that's what drew me to take him up on his offer a few days later. We met at an upscale bar in Beverly Hills, the kind of place where appearances and status meant everything. Tom looked perfectly at home amidst the trendy crowd, smartly dressed yet still exuding that roguish edge. To old friends, he proclaimed, clinking his glass against mine. And new beginnings. We chatted idly about business, the usual superficial banter, but I couldn't shake the sense that Tom had something else on his mind. There was a glint in his eye, a subtle undercurrent of mischief that hinted at deeper intentions. It wasn't until our third or fourth round that he finally broached the subject. So, Josh, how are things at home? He leaned in conspiratorially. Lily still seem a little distant? The question caught me off guard. How could he possibly know about the growing rift between us? Tom must have sensed my surprise. Hey, I'm just observant, he said with a shrug. I felt uncomfortable after that question. I need to leave now, and I left. If I only knew Tom was the biggest snake. He and Lily had a secret that I wasn't aware of. The early stages of Lily and Tom's plan to siphon funds from my accounts went off without a hitch. With her inside access, Lily began funneling small, meticulously calculated amounts into a secret offshore account, just enough to slip under my ever-watchful radar. At first, the transfers were so minute, so expertly disguised, that they didn't even register on my quarterly reports. But there was a subtle shift in Lily's demeanor, a newfound confidence that should have tipped me off that something was amiss. Just taking care of a few things, she'd say with a sly smile whenever I questioned her about her sudden interest in the financial details. You know how much I love getting organized. Fool that I was, I believed her lies, basking in the false hope that her renewed engagement was a sign that the old Lily, my Lily, was finally resurfacing. All the while, Tom played the role of devoted lover to perfection, more intimate, if the furtive glances and hushed whispers were any indication. Like a master puppeteer, he was slowly tightening his strings around Lily, weaving an intricate web of lust and promised fortune. Don't you want to be free, babe? I can imagine him whispering in those moments of delirious fantasy. Free from all of this, the big house, the social prison, just a little while longer, and we'll have everything we need to start over, just you and me. And Lily, blinded by her resentment towards the life I'd built for us, drank it all in like a woman dying of thirst. The thrill of their deception made them sloppy, careless. Intoxicated by the ease of their early success, Tom started pushing for bigger payouts, more frequent transfers, and Lily, wholly under his sway, obliged without a second thought. It was the little things that finally caught my attention. Changes in account balances that couldn't be explained away, funds that seemed to bleed from my empire like a wound that refused to clot. At first, I chalked it up to clerical errors or investment losses, but my meticulous nature wouldn't allow me to simply sweep the discrepancies under the rug. I started digging, poring over the books with a fervor that must have seemed obsessive to any outside observer. That's when the pattern emerged, a slow but steady stream of money trickling out of my accounts and into parts unknown. I could feel the web of deceit closing in around me, but I refused to confront Lily until I had irrefutable proof of her betrayal. It was then that I turned to an old friend, someone whose skills and discretion I trusted implicitly. Derek had been a cop back in our younger days, a tenacious detective with a knack for sniffing out the truth. I need you to look into something for me, I told him over a tense lunch meeting. Discreetly. Derek's brow furrowed, but he didn't ask questions. That was one of the things I appreciated about him. He understood the value of confidentiality. The weeks that followed were agonizing as I awaited Derek's findings. Lily remained distant, lost in whatever fantasy world she and Tom had constructed, while I struggled to maintain my usual composure. The business demanded my focus, but my mind kept drifting to the uncertainty that had taken root. Finally, the call came. Derek's voice was grim. We need to meet. In person. The moment I laid eyes on the evidence he'd gathered, my world shifted on its axis. Bank statements, phone records, surveillance footage. It all painted a damning picture of Lily's betrayal, her affair with Tom, and their meticulous scheme to siphon off my assets. How could I have been so blind? The words tumbled out, laced with a bitterness I hadn't known I was capable of. Derek's expression was one of sympathy, but his words offered little comfort. The heart wants what it wants, my friend. Even the most brilliant minds can be blinded by emotion. His advice was sound, as always. Rather than confront Lily immediately, I should bide my time, gather more proof, and plan my response with the same calculated precision that had built my empire. And so I waited, feigning ignorance while silently collecting the pieces of the puzzle. Each new revelation was like a twisted knife in my gut. The intimate messages between Lily and Tom, the records of their clandestine meetings, the ever-growing trail of financial transactions that drained my accounts like a slow, insidious leak. Finally, when I had more than enough evidence to bury them both, I summoned Lily to my study. She sauntered in with that practiced nonchalance, utterly oblivious to the reckoning that awaited her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "About what?" She feigned innocence, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Without a word, I slid the stack of evidence across the desk towards her. Phone records, bank statements, photographs, a meticulous documentation of her indiscretions, her greed, her utter disregard for the life we'd built together. The color drained from her face as she flipped through the damning paper trail. "Josh, I can explain. Save it." I held up a hand, silencing her feeble protests. "I don't want to hear your excuses." For a moment, she seemed to wilt under the weight of my gaze, her defiance crumbling. But then, a spark of determination flared in her eyes. "You can't prove anything," she spat, regaining her composure. "It's my word against yours." I couldn't help but let out a bark of bitter laughter. "Is that what you really think, Lily? That I'd be so careless, so sloppy?" Leaning back in my chair, I regarded her with a mixture of pity and disgust. "I have everything I need to bury you, and your little accomplice, for a very long time. Embezzlement, fraud, criminal conspiracy, the list goes on." Her bravado evaporated in an instant, and I could see the fear creeping into her eyes, the realization that she was well and truly cornered. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued, my tone brooking no argument. "You're going to sign over any and all claims to my assets, my wealth, my entire life. Every last penny you try to steal, you'll relinquish. And then you're going to walk away, disappear from my world entirely." Lily opened her mouth, perhaps to plead or bargain, but I cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Or, you can take your chances with the law. I have more than enough evidence to ensure you'll be facing a very long prison sentence. Your choice." The fight seemed to drain out of her then, her shoulders slumping in defeat. We both knew there was no other viable option, no escape from the trap I'd so meticulously constructed. With trembling hands, she signed the documents I'd prepared, legally severing any tie she had to my wealth, my success, my life. And just like that, the woman I'd once loved, the radiant dreamer I'd vowed to cherish, was gone, reduced to a shell of herself, broken and resigned to her fate. I expected to feel vindicated in that moment, a sense of triumph at having outmaneuvered her so completely. But as I watched Lily gather her meager belongings, preparing to slink away into obscurity, I felt hollow, empty. Perhaps that was the true price of such ruthless precision, the loss of whatever shred of humanity still clung to my soul. As for Tom, his reckoning would come in due time. I had the authorities tracking his every move, building an airtight case that would see him behind bars for years to come. A fitting punishment for the man who'd orchestrated this entire debacle, who'd preyed on Lily's discontentment and nearly brought my world crumbling down. When they finally apprehended him, a smug grin plastered on his face as if he'd already accepted his fate, I made a point of paying him a visit. The look of bravado melted from his features the moment he saw me, replaced by a flicker of fear that sent a rush of sick satisfaction coursing through my veins. "You got what you deserved," I told him, my voice laced with contempt. "You thought you could take everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed for, and just walk away?" Tom swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. For once, the smooth-talking charmer had no clever quips, no roguish banter to fall back on. Please, Josh," he stammered, his eyes darting nervously around the stark visitation room. "We can work something out, right? You know people. You've got connections." I let out a derisive snort, reveling in his desperation. You're pathetic, you know that? Cowering like a whipped dog now that the tables have turned. Leaning in close, I fixed him with a piercing stare. Let me make one thing crystal clear. You're going to rot in here. Every last day of your sentence, you'll serve. And when you finally taste freedom again, if you so much as look in my direction, I'll bury you so deep that not even the worms will be able to find you. With that, I turned on my heel and strode out, leaving Tom to wallow in the hopelessness of his situation. He'd made his bed, and now he would lie in it, surrounded by the cold, unforgiving walls that would be his home for the foreseeable future. As for me, I emerged from that encounter victorious, but changed. The person I saw reflected in the gleaming metal detectors, the watchful eyes of the guards, was a man I scarcely recognized. Cold, ruthless, devoid of the basic human compassion that had once made me, well, human. In the end, I had prevailed. My empire stood tall, unshaken by the turmoil that had nearly brought it crumbling down. My reputation remained intact, a testament to the unwavering precision with which I dismantled the threat posed by Lily and Tom's misguided scheme. But at what cost? I looked around at the palatial estate that had once been my crowning achievement, my symbol of success, and felt nothing. The opulent furnishings, the sparkling chandeliers, the vast expanses of marble and glass, they were all just things, empty trappings of a life that had lost all meaning. As I poured myself a glass of the finest Scotch money could buy, I couldn't help but wonder, was this victory really worth the price I'd paid? Lily was gone, cast out into the world with nothing but the clothes on her back and a future as empty as the hollow ache in my chest. What should have been a moment of triumph felt like ashes in my mouth. My merciless retaliation had ensured that the empire I built remained unscathed. But the personal cost, perhaps that was a wound that would never fully heal. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.